Thank you for, yeah, see, I knew that would happen when I start talking. So thank you again for inviting me to talk to you. So today I want to talk about some of the verses from the Dhammapada. But before we do that, I want us just to do a simple breathing awareness meditation, just to get ourselves nice and relaxed and steady and stable. So it doesn't matter that wherever you're sitting, it's okay. You don't need to change. Just sit nice and comfortable and lightly close your eyes. And just focus your awareness on your breath. And just become aware that you're breathing in and you're breathing out. And don't change your breathing here, just breathe normally. And when your mind starts to wander off, just gently bring it back and start focusing on the breath again. And as you're breathing out, I want you to soften your shoulders. Just allow them to drop down and feel yourself relaxing into your chair. And let's just spend another minute just focusing on our breath. Okay, so just very slowly now start to open your eyes. Now, if my voice goes all croaky, I apologize for that. I've still got a bit of a chest infection there. So today what I want to talk about is some powerful lessons that we can take from the Dhammapada. So I don't know if any of you have a copy of the Dhammapada or if you ever just pick it up and read it, but it is around 436 verses of Buddha's wisdom. So somebody has taken lots of the sayings of Buddha and put them into one book. The book that we're going to be, the translation that we're going to use here is by a person called Eknath S. Warren. So he was an Indian spiritual teacher, an author, and a translator and interpreter. And he used to look at all the old Indian religious texts, mainly the Hindu ones, but he did do some of the Buddhist. And he did, I think, one of the best that I've come across translations of the Dhammapada. So the Dhammapada is like an early self-help book. It's just one you can turn to whenever you need some guidance or you need just a little different perspective. So I would say to you that if you've never picked up the book, then it's such a great book. Just pick up, open it, read some of the verses, and just sit and reflect on those verses. It is full of wisdom. If I want to start just by giving a verse here, just verse 354, which is, there is no gift better than the gift of Dharma, no gift more sweet, no gift more joyful. It puts an end to cravings and the sorrow they bring. So that's what I'm bringing for you today, the gift of the Dharma. So I hope that there's some wisdom here, that something that you can take away. So what I'm going to do is split it into lessons. Let's hope we can get through at least 4 of the lessons. And at the end of each lesson, then I'll give time for you to ask any questions. You can unmute yourself at that time. So the first lesson is about the power of our thoughts. And it actually is verse 1 of the Dhammapada. So it says, our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows evil thought, as the wheel of a cart follows the oxen that pulls it. So I'm sure you don't have many oxen pulling carts where you are, but we do here still. So what it's saying here is that our lives are shaped by our mind, by our thoughts. So everything that you are is a result of your thoughts. So first we think and then we act. So discontentment, dissatisfaction, those type of thoughts generally come from bad or unskillful thoughts, and happiness and gratitude and contentment, they seem to come from good and skillful thoughts. So what we think, the mind focuses on. So the thought is the start of any of our actions of body and of speech. So because our mind is like a machine that looks for patterns, because our mind is just bombarded by so many sensations. What we take in through our 5 senses is so much that the mind can't cope with it. So it has to filter certain things out. And the mind is always looking for patterns because it makes it easier. If you've done this, if this situation has happened before and you acted in this way, you will act in that way again if you're not being mindful. So the mind just quickly goes the easiest route. It just wants to find a pattern, something that you've done or close to what you've done before, and then that will be your action. So it's important that we focus on our minds, that we focus on our thought process. So somebody asked me the other day, are thoughts powerful? And actually, the words, they're not powerful. The thought is just a process of your brain. So something has stimulated it, either outside you or inside you, and that thought has arisen. So that thought has absolutely no power until we focus on it. And when we focus on that thought, we give it the power. So it is us that is actually making that thought powerful. So there was a story that goes with this first verse of the Dhammapada, and I think it was about an elephant, but it doesn't make much sense to me. So I turned it into a horse. So it's a great way of describing what we're talking about here. It's a person sitting on a horse. So the horse signifies the irrational and the subconscious part of our mind. And this part of our mind is driven by our habits and those patterns of behavior. And it tends to be over emotional. And the person who's sitting on the horse is the rational part of our mind. So the person sitting on the horse is supposed to be in control of the horse. So your rational thinking mind should be controlling your irrational and your subconscious mind. But we all know that a lot of the time, our thoughts are controlling us because we just tend to chase after every thought. So Milarepa said about this, that if you throw a stick for a dog, the dog will just go running straight after the stick. He won't look at the stick and think, oh, yeah, this is a great bit of wood and it's nice and long and I love the way the person threw the stick. It wouldn't look like that. It would just throw the stick and it would go chasing after it. And that is what we're like with our thoughts. A thought comes into our mind, we just chase after it. And what Milarepa said was that we should turn and face the thought like a tiger and face it down, look at it, think about it. Is it worth chasing after, or should I just let it go? So instead of chasing after every thought, we should be looking at these thoughts, and we should be able to, us sitting on the horse, we should be the person who is controlling. So we need to take back control of that horse, which is our mind. And the way that we can do that is through meditation, through mindfulness, and through reflection practices. So as we go through these lessons, we'll touch on each of those points. But I want to just talk about mindfulness at the moment. So not necessarily the mindfulness from the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but more really to do with this new secular modern mindfulness movement, which obviously has its problems because it doesn't go deep enough and it sticks on the awareness part and doesn't really touch on the ethics part or the wisdom part. But there are some benefits with this new modern mindfulness, because what it is trying to tell you to do is to keep coming back to the present moment here. Keep bringing yourself back to what is happening right now. And the point of that is that when we chase after our thoughts, when we just allow our thoughts to control us, then our mind goes shooting off into the future. We start building stories. So we may have had one negative thought, and instead of catching it and letting it go, we chase it. And we put another thought and another thought, and we build a whole story around these thoughts. What happens then is that the mind starts to believe it, because the mind cannot tell the difference between what is fact and what is fantasy. So if you are building this story, you've built this story about this is going to happen or this won't happen, the mind will start to believe it. And when that happens, then we've gone right off in the wrong direction. And the same when our mind goes back to the past and we get those repetitive thoughts where we keep saying, why did they do that to me? Why did they say that? Why does that happen to me? All these why questions that keep coming over and over and over in our head. So when we allow our minds to go off into the future, we can't do anything about that. We have lost control. The future is not here. This is just your imagination. And when your mind goes off and tells stories and the mind believes it, and we start to become stressed and anxious, it's not because of what is happening right now. It's because your imagination has built this story. So it means you're actually suffering from your own imagination. You're not suffering from what is happening right at this moment. And the same when the past, we can't go back and change the past. All we can do is learn from the past and move forward. So when we keep going back and having this, allowing these thoughts to keep coming into our head, again, we can do nothing about that. The only time that we can ever do anything about what is happening is now, right in this moment. So that's why mindfulness is such an important practice. Maybe a better word for mindfulness actually is awareness, because that's exactly what it is. When we come back to now, we become aware of our thought process. We become aware of our emotions. We become aware of our body. What is our body trying to tell us? Remember, our body can tell us so much. It's not just here. There's a vehicle. The body can tell you when you're sick and when you're tired. Your gut feelings can sense things a lot quicker than your brain can actually sort something out. So when we come back to the present moment, we have a full awareness of our body. And we also have an awareness of what is happening right now, right at this moment. So it means when we're armed with all of that awareness, we can make good choices. It means that we've taken back control of our thought process. So the way to do this is to put two things, your daily practices and mindfulness together. So maybe you say to yourself, every time I walk through a door, I'm going to just take a breath and watch the breath come in, watch the breath come out, bring myself back to the present moment. Or maybe your phone rings 6 or 7 times a day. So whenever it rings, instead of getting annoyed with the phone or even notifications coming, instead of getting annoyed with it, take a breath. When the phone rings or when you get a notification, before you deal with it, take a breath and bring yourself back. Your breath is a great tool for bringing yourself back into the present moment. And the reason for that is because the breath is always in the present moment. We can only breathe in the moment. We can't breathe for yesterday, or we can't breathe for tomorrow. We can only breathe now. So when you focus on your breath, you're naturally bringing yourself back. When we do breathing awareness practice, like the one we started, the meditation we started with, what happens is you're bringing yourself back into the present moment there. When you're in this present moment, you're armed with all of that awareness. So think of things that you do on a daily basis and marry mindfulness together. A simple thing like taking a shower. When you're in the middle of taking a shower, close your eyes and focus. What does it feel like with the water touching my body? Or what does it feel like, the soap? What does it smell like? We close our eyes because your eyes is your most powerful sense. And by closing your eyes, your other senses become more powerful. So simple things like that. When you're sitting eating, eat mindfully, or at least take the first 6 or 7 bites mindfully. When you do that, you're training your mind to keep coming back to the present moment. You're training your mind to be more focused. What you're doing is you're taking back control of your thoughts and your thought process. When we do that, it means we're able to respond. So when we're in control of that horse, we can respond. When the horse is in control of us, we blindly react. And there's a big difference there between reacting and responding. So a great way of learning how to take control of our thoughts is by doing mindfulness practices to bring ourselves back into the present moment throughout the day. Remember, we can't be 24/7 mindful because we have this wonderful ability of looking into the future and having memories from the past. And they're great things to have, but we don't want to live there. Because, you know, if when we're there, either in the future or in the past, we're missing this moment. And when you miss this moment, it is never coming back to you. This moment is unique. There will never be a moment like this. And if you are off into the future or back into the past, it means you're just sleepwalking through life. So mindfulness is a great way of us to be able to take back control of our thoughts. So any questions on this? Unmute yourself and ask questions so I can have a drink. No questions? You just want to keep me talking, I can see.
I didn't mean to say at the beginning, Yeshe, thank you very much for doing this talk for us, but my system is going haywire. Anyway, you feel welcomed, I hope.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay.
It's okay.
But no questions.
People know me. You don't need to welcome me now. But if there are any questions, then please ask, whatever they are. I'm happy to answer. Okay. So I said that there are three things that we can help with our mind and with our thoughts. And they were mindfulness, which I just spoke about. The other two are meditation and reflection. So let's look at the meditation, because that leads us nicely into the second lesson. So the second lesson is about, excuse me, conquering yourself being the hardest battle. So verse 103 of the Dhammapad says, one who conquers himself is greater than another who conquers 1,000 times 1,000 men on a battlefield. So the hardest battle that you'll ever fight in your life is with yourself, trying to conquer your own mind. And I think, you know, we all know this to be true, because we all have that little voice in our head, that inner critic telling us that we're not good enough and we'll never be able to do this, and other people are better than us, and why don't you just give up? I mean, we have this negative voice in our head, and it is that we need to try to control. And that is the hardest battle. And you see how hard it is, because I mean, Buddha said the one who can conquer it is better than a person who's conquered 1,000 men in 1,000 different battles. So it's not an easy task to do. It's not easy, but it is not impossible. So, you know, when we allow our unconscious mind, that subconscious mind, to control us, like I was just talking about, a lot of the time it starts to sabotage us. It starts to take us up in the wrong direction. So if you remember, when Buddha sat down in Bodh Gaya to meditate, and he said, I'm not going to get up from here. I'm going to keep meditating until I realize something, until he became awakened. And while he was there, he had all these things thrown at him. So there was cold weather, there was hot weather, there was beautiful dancing girls, and then there was horrible monsters, and there was armies, and all these things that were thrown at him. But what he realized in the end, that all of that was from his own mind. He was just fighting himself. So you may have heard the name Mara. I mean, that's what we call it, Mara, but Mara is not a person outside of us. So a lot of people misunderstand this and think that Buddha is like the God and Mara is like the devil. It's not like that at all. Buddha was not a God, and Mara is not a devil. Mara is just that tempter part of your mind. So Mara is your own mind, but it's that tempter. It's the one that tempts you and saying, yeah, we should do this, pulls you away from doing what you know you should be doing, which may not be as exciting as the things that you shouldn't be doing. So the tempter is there in our own mind. So the only way that we can control and start to take back control and have that battle with that tempter is by effort, discipline, mindfulness, meditation, and reflection. So that's the only way that we can stop ourselves, you know, help ourselves to overcome the tendency of that sabotaging ourselves. If we don't put in effort, then of course we're never going to get any result. And part of the Buddhist path is about discipline. It's about setting boundaries and red lines. And we need to be doing that. When we're children, we were given boundaries, and you know, we didn't much like those boundaries, but we learned that, okay, we could go so far. And of course, as kids, we pushed those boundaries as far as we could until we got a slap, and then we was like, okay, no, that's as far as I can go here. So we had those boundaries and we learned from those boundaries. We need to be setting ourselves boundaries. We need to be clear in our own minds exactly where we would go to. What is our red line? Where do we not want to step over? That is for you to decide that. You know, we're all different people. The tempter inside of us, this Mara in our mind, has different ways of tempting us because we're different people. So, you know, it might be chocolate that tempts you, and it might be going out, it might be fast cars or whatever, or earning lots of money, a big bank account, whatever the temptation is, we're all different. So it means we all have to set our own discipline. We all have to set our own red lines so we understand as far as we can go. So the way that we can do that is to get to know ourselves. You know, the truth is that the only person that we can really get to know is ourselves. You know, you can live with people for many, many years, 50, 60 years, but you don't know them. You'll only know what they show you. You'll only know what you can see from them. You don't know the dark secrets inside the head. Nobody knows your dark secrets, only you. So through meditation, we can sit down and we can start to look at ourselves, start to get to know ourselves, start to understand what makes us tick. Why do we have this bias? Why do we have this discrimination? Because it's from this that we can start to then say, okay, this is my red line, then I don't want to go past this red line. And we start to set ourselves these boundaries. That is how you're going to conquer your mind, through meditation. So verse 25 of the Dhammapad says, if you meditate earnestly through spiritual disciplines, you can make an island for yourself that no flood can overwhelm. So Buddha says puts a lot of store on meditation here. If you do it earnestly, and I think, again, that's another point, you know, you do it earnestly, you put in a great amount of effort. It isn't necessary, you know, I sit down or when I can be bothered and I do a couple of minutes here and I've been busy this week. You know, that's not doing it earnestly and that's not putting in effort. But if you do, then through these spiritual disciplines, so these spiritual disciplines are your red lines or your boundaries. You can make an island of yourself that nobody can flood. It means that mind cannot be overwhelmed. It means that you've taken back control of your mind. So the person who lives only looking for pleasure, again, is going to end up unhappy. So when we're sitting in meditation, we're not sitting in meditation to be the happiest person. I mean, actually, when you sit in meditation, and we'll talk about this a bit later on, we get that joy. The word they use is bliss, but I don't like that word. We get this inner joyful feeling, but that's inner joy. The person who chases outside joy, chases all their desires, they will never be happy because they've lost control of their mind. And Buddha puts this in verse 7, that a strong wind blows down a weak tree. The tempter overwhelms weak people who, eating too much and working too little, are caught in the frantic pursuit of pleasure. So the tempter comes up again here, Lord. If you have a weak mind, that tempter is going to be there. That tempter is going to make you look at pleasures, just keep going after pleasures, all those desires. And remember, we can never, ever fulfill our desires. It's a never-ending game. And we'll be trying to fulfill all these desires right up to the moment that we take our last breath. So we shouldn't be looking at pleasures. When we sit in meditation to make that mind strong. to take back control of that tempter and not to ignore the tempter. You know, if you're sitting in meditation and the tempter is throwing these, you know, things at you, oh, you could be out now doing this, or you could be doing that. Don't ignore that. Don't try, oh no, push that away, because you need to overpower it. You need to say to it, no, this is where I want to be sitting. This is what I want to be doing. I want to be working on my mind. I want to start to conquer my mind. So when your mind is weak, you're like that tree that a strong wind is going to blow down. And Buddha made that clear, really, I think, when he was talking in the Four Noble Truths, the second noble truth, when he was talking about the causes of our suffering, the causes of discontentment and dissatisfaction. The causes of that is our endless grasping and craving, the tempter always trying to make us go and do things that are pleasurable. I'm not saying here that we shouldn't have pleasure, because of course we should. I mean, why not? But it shouldn't be the main part of our life. The main part of our life is getting to know ourselves, meditating, understanding, making changes in ourselves. When we see that this is an outdated concept or an outdated pattern of behavior, when we've seen that, then we can put in a plan and change that. And that is going to help you as you go towards your last breath, or even when you're taking your last breath. Going out to see lots of movies and going down the pub and having great fun every night is not going to help you at the time of your death. And in fact, it will be the opposite of that, because you've got so wrapped up in all your pleasures that when you're going to take your last breath, you won't want to go. You're so attached to this pleasure that you've been chasing after. So when we sit in meditation to conquer our minds, we need to look carefully at what are the causes of our suffering. Why am I always craving this? Why do I discriminate against this? Why do I have biases against that? The more you do that, the more that you're going to learn about yourself. But the one thing that you really need to be working on is craving and grasping and chasing your desires. So, you know, these days, because of the smartphone and the internet and that, people are looking for that instant gratification. They're looking for things that entertain their mind. In fact, the whole time now, people, particularly the young people, are trying to entertain their minds. They cannot just sit down. You know, they just sit down and automatically their hand goes for their phone. And it's not just old people, not just young people, I have to say. I mean, older people are getting exactly the same. But what you're doing there is you're making your mind weak. You're losing your willpower. And of course, I think a lot of the big problems that we have today is because of lack of willpower. So I'm talking about obesity and drug addiction and the mental illness and narcissistic behavior, that's selfishness, and there's a lot of that around. And all of these are because you have a weak mind, because you have no willpower. So that is why we need to sit in meditation and take back control of our minds. We need to conquer those minds. And when we do, this is what happens in verse 8 of the Dhammapad. Buddha explains it this way: as the strongest wind cannot shake a mountain, the tempter cannot shake those who are self-disciplined. So if you are self-disciplined, if you just watch your mind and you meditate and you work on your mind, you're going to be unshakable. Whatever that temptator is going to throw at you, it's not going to work. You have your own self-discipline. And that's what I was talking about, setting yourself boundaries and setting yourself red lines. So if we stop looking for pleasures and we can control our senses and we moderate our wants, this is going to bring us inner peace. And that inner peace only comes once we have conquered our mind. So a trained mind is a peaceful mind. And that is what we should be looking for. And we're not going to get that, I'm sorry to say, through just blindly reciting ritual practices or blindly following the teacher. We are only going to get that when we do practice. Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism is not even a philosophy. Buddhism is a path of practice. And if you're just going to read books or you're just going to do ritual practices and make offerings and that's the lot, then you're never going to be able to conquer that mind. What we need to be doing is we need to do meditation. We need to do the path of practice. So I'm not saying that don't do ritual practices. If you like doing them, okay, fair enough, but it's not enough. It will never help you to stop that tempter. You'll only do that by doing meditation practice. So remember, the more practice you do, then of course, the more wise you're going to become. So our starting point really for getting wisdom in Buddhism is the 5 precepts, trying to adhere to those 5 precepts as much as we can. And then it's about understanding and implementing the 4 noble truths and the 8-fold path, and particularly the one that is the wise view. The wise view one is about understanding and turning that knowledge into wisdom for impermanence, understanding attachment, understanding interconnectedness, non-self, and cause and effect. If you have the right view and if you meditate, then you are most definitely going to conquer your mind. So that's how we can conquer our minds. We can conquer our minds by sitting down, meditating, and working on ourselves. So remember, it's not sitting down and thinking about a deity sitting on our head. It's not sitting down and just watching your breath. I mean, watching your breath is a great practice to calm yourself down. But once you've calmed yourself down, you need to start looking at your mind. Analytical meditation is the one that is going to help you the most. Because when you analyze your mind, when you analyze, why am I thinking like this? Why am I doing this? And that is where you're going to start to conquer your mind. And when you've conquered that mind, then you're going to be that mountain. And if you don't sit down and do these practices and the meditation and being analytical and looking at yourself, then you're going to be more like that weak tree that is just blown down in the wind. So this is lesson 2. So any questions from lesson 2? Please have questions. My throat is croaking now. Oh, lots of people have sneaked in while I wasn't looking. So no questions? Is it because it's bank holiday? You think you've got a day off from asking questions?
Jeff has a question.
Hey, good old Jeff.
You need to unmute, Jeff.
I can't lip read, Jeff.
On mute. Yeah. Hello, Yeshe. I have to say, although Bob says I have a question, I don't, because I feel totally convinced by what you've been telling us. So I don't really have a question. I'm sorry, but I'm totally convinced. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I misled you.
Yes. Maybe you have the question then, Bob. I can't believe nobody has questions. Usually you're good at
as Jeff says, what you're saying is spot on. It resonates.
Okay, see if I can make a mistake in the next lesson.
All right, deliberate mistake. Let's all look out for that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can come back.
Okay.
Okay, so then let's carry on. So then the third lesson is about finding the highest knowledge. So the highest knowledge is wisdom. So remember, normal knowledge is secondhand. It's something that you learn from other people. Wisdom is when you've taken that knowledge and you've turned it into wisdom. You've turned it into the way that you live your life, the way you act. So you've turned somebody else's knowledge into your wisdom. And that is the highest knowledge. So verse 11 says, the deluded, imagining trivial things to be vital to life, follow their vain fancies and never attain the highest knowledge. And verse 12 says, but the wise, knowing what is trivial and what is vital, set their thoughts on the supreme goal and they attain the highest knowledge. So I read both verses there because these are in the first part of the Dhammapad, which is called the twins. So one verse is like we had the tree that fell down, and then the next verse was the mountain. So here, the deluded person, the ones that imagine all those trivial things in life are important. And those people just go around following their own fancies, which means they don't stop and look. They're not even looking for a higher knowledge. They're not even trying to be on the spiritual path, or even just try to understand themselves, to understand what, what makes them tick. So these are the deluded people that will never reach that highest knowledge. But the wise people, like all of you, that's not the mistake. Knowing what is trivial and what is vital, set their thoughts on the supreme goal and attain the highest knowledge. So our goal should be to become the best possible person that we can be. I mean, that should be our goal, and not just for our sakes, but of course for the sakes of all beings. I mean, that's what we should be doing, working on ourselves so we can help other people. So we need to understand our patterns of behavior. We need to understand our biases. We all have them. And the trouble with those biases is that it takes a lot of meditation and a lot of reflection and mindfulness to be able to pick up on those biases, because they're ingrained in us and we don't even realize that we are biased. And it was like the troubles they were having in America when the white policemen were shooting the black people. And they were doing it unconsciously. It was an unconscious bias that they thought all black people, they've been brought up to think all black people are dangerous. So when they just moved their hand, they panicked and shot them. And you see, that's how dangerous our biases can be. If we don't look at them and we don't stop and reflect on our biases and learn so we can change them. So, a lot of our biases and these patterns of behavior and our concepts and all have stemmed from when we were young. So a lot of it comes from our parents. They have a lot to answer for, these parents. And if you're a parent, I don't mean you. So parents have a lot to answer for. So does school, and so do religions, our friends and family. All of these people have molded us, and without us even really knowing, they've made us into this thing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but until you stop and you look and you work on them, then you're never going to know, because you're just going to blindly keep having these biases. You're going to blindly keep going through these patterns of behavior. Remember, I said at the beginning that the mind always looks for patterns, and it looks for what have you done in the past, and then it just does it again because it's the easiest thing. So now we could get into a whole argument here about free will, but we won't, because that'll be all night we may argue on that point. Do we have free will or don't we have free will? But we do have patterns of behavior. And here we need to be careful. And then this is also where we need to be careful with our children, because whatever you take in through your five senses will be stored somewhere. Now, if you follow the Yogacara school of Buddhism, then they talk about the eighth consciousness, your store consciousness, which makes it sound like it's in one place, it's a little storeroom, but it isn't. I mean, that store consciousness, we keep things in different parts of our brain, but we keep them. So we may ourselves forget them, and they may never come back up, but they're there. Whatever you've taken in through your senses are stored inside of you. So while I say you should be careful with your children, you're letting them play these video games where they're killing and they're getting the habit and just getting used to blowing people's heads off. It is stored inside of them. Now, whether it comes out or not, it's up to the child and their upbringing and their environment, of course, but the potential is there. And that's why we need to be careful about our patterns of behavior. We need to look at them carefully and understand what is this pattern? Why am I working this way? And one of the best ways of doing this is by doing a reflection practice. So I said at the beginning, there are three things to do: meditation, mindfulness, and reflection. So we've covered mindfulness, meditation. So let's look at reflection. A reflection practice is a simple but a really powerful practice to do. You just sit, you don't even have to meditate, you just sit and close your eyes and you reflect back over the day. And you reflect back on what has happened today. You're just picking up the key things. It's not any of the unimportant things, it's the key things that have happened. So first of all, you look at the good things, the things that worked out well for you today. And we look at them because if you look at them, you learn from that experience. So I don't know if I've said this before, probably I have, but we're told that we learn from our experiences, but we actually don't. We learn from reflecting on our experience. Remember, every moment is an experience, and we can't be learning from every moment. They're going too quickly. So we have to reflect back. And when we reflect back on these experiences, that is when we learn from them. So a reflection practice helps us look at the things that worked out well for us. And that reinforces that behavior. So when we find ourselves in that position again, we will act in that way. So that is a pattern of behavior that we need to reinforce. It worked, it was good. It worked for me, it worked for the other people. So we reflect back on the good and we reinforce it. And you reinforce it just by thinking about it and thinking about what you did and how it worked. And then we reflect back on the practices or the things that didn't work out for us. So here, when we're doing this reflection practice, we're not playing the blame game. It's so easy for us, and we do it without thinking. I mean, we were never taught at school how to blame other people. We've just picked it up and we do a really good job of it. It's so easy to blame other people. In this reflection practice, we are not blaming. We are not blaming other people, and we're not blaming ourselves. There is no blame here. We did this, it didn't work out the way that it should have worked out. And that is enough. There is no need to go into whose fault it was. What you need to be spending your time doing is thinking, if this situation happens again, thinking of a better way, a different way, a way that is going to be more helpful, more kind and compassionate. So again, we're learning from our experiences. So you look back over the things that didn't work and you think of a different way to act. So now you've planted that seed in your eighth consciousness, in that store consciousness. So it's now sitting there as a potential. And the more that you do that action, the more you're going to water that seed and the more that it's going to grow. So this is a reflection practice. We reflect on the good points to reinforce them, and we reflect on the not so good points to think of a different way to act, to plant that seed in our mind. So we start to change our patterns of behavior. We start to change our thought processes. We start to become that best possible person we can be. A reflection practice is such a great practice to do. I don't know if I've told this story. I've been coming to you so long that I might be running out of stories. But when I first came to, this is how naive I was. When I first came to India 20 odd years ago and became a monk, I wanted to go to a high teacher, a yogi or something like that, and get a really powerful practice. And that powerful practice was going to change my life. So I don't know. It was what I was thinking at the time. You have to excuse me. I was coming from London. So anyway, so that was what I wanted. So when I went, eventually found this yogi and I went and sat with him. And I thought, you know, this is it. He's going to tell me this earth-shattering thing that is going to change my whole life. And he told me about the reflection practice. And oh, I was so disappointed. I just thought, oh, that's it. I've left my whole life in London. I've sold up everything and I've come here to become a monk. And he's just telling me to reflect. I was really disappointed. I can't tell you. And when I was walking back to my room, I was thinking, oh, I can't believe this. But I thought anyway, you know, best I try it because he said that. And actually, for me, it was one of the biggest turning points in my life. I started to see things more clearly. I started to see that, hang on, you're always doing that. Why are you always doing that? Because you always do that and you're always getting the same results. Unless you change that, you're never going to change the result. So actually, it turned out to be one of the best teachings that I'd ever had. But at that time, I didn't quite thank him for that. But anyway, this is what a reflection practice is all about. This is how we can start to become that person who is disciplined, the person who is not going to be chasing after trivial things. So we want to be the wise person, the person who's going to be chasing after that supreme goal. So I think these days, I mean, maybe not just these days, I mean, even when I was younger, we tend to be brought up to be a little bit greedy, a little bit selfish. We're money orientated. We always want something, want a good job because we want to have power. So I think we're taught to be independent and driven. And in some ways, that's not a bad thing because, you know, we need to be able to achieve things and we need to push ourselves. But it's when it gets to the point that it's all about you and it's not about anybody else. So I think we learn from a real early age that, you know, you are what you own. And if you don't own the best car, if you don't own the biggest house, then you're nothing. I mean, that is the kind of attitude that we're brought up with. And it's not necessarily all from our parents. Advertising tells us this. If you're a person who does social media now, just go on Instagram and you see all those photos on Instagram. It is just showing us these are the beautiful people. They have this beautiful car. They go on this holiday. Look how beautiful they look. Look at their figure. Look at their muscles. I mean, you know, we're all bombarded with this, and particularly the young children now. So we forget about the important things in life. And if you don't focus on those little things in life, then you're going to miss life. So here, what I'm talking about is gratitude. So gratitude is another way for us to head towards that goal of the supreme goal. Just stop every now and again throughout the day and think of something you're grateful for. If your mind is going off and you're becoming totally negative or pessimistic, just stop a moment and just think, what am I grateful for? You know, I love gratitude as a practice. One, because it is so easy. It is such an easy practice to do. Just stop what you're doing, sit a moment, and then just think, what am I grateful for? And you know, it can be anything. You can be grateful for people. You can be grateful for situations. You can be grateful for your possessions. All of these things you can be grateful for. And you know, once you have gratitude, it leads to contentment. And once you have contentment, you'll have a peaceful mind. And when you have that peaceful mind, you'll be able to have the awakened mind. You'll be able to have that supreme knowledge. So, and it stems from being grateful, not just about the big things, but sometimes stop and just think about the little things. The birds singing. I mean, where I live here, we live in a temple in the forest, and the birds are singing. And sometimes, you know, you hear it all the time, and it doesn't resonate with you anymore. But when you just stop a moment, and I mean, you won't hear them now because it's midnight, but you know, in the daytime, you'll hear them singing. And just to stop and just think, oh God, how lucky I am to live in this place. So gratitude is such a simple practice to do, one that will pull you back from all those desires that are going to take you off in the wrong direction. Gratitude is going to be one that is going to ground you. It's going to lead you to feel more contented. And you know, when you're contented, you may not have the best phone, you may not have the biggest house or the nicest car, and you may not be the most stylish of dresses. But what you have, you're grateful for, and you're contented. And when you're contented, you have everything you need. And at that point, when we've got gratitude for all these things in our life and we're contented, then it's like, it's like we're relaxing, we're letting go. The mind calms down. And when that mind is calm, now we can start to see things more clearly. We can start to see things as they really are. So there are so much more important things in life than to be chasing after entertainment the whole time. When you have gratitude, you start to see the value in the smallest of things, and you're going to be much happier, because you know, when you have a peaceful mind, that is when you're going to have that inner happiness. So this outer happiness that we spend our whole time chasing, it's just fleeting. It's just never going to be there for long. And the trouble is, we like it so much, we hold on to it, we get attached to it. And then when it goes, we start to suffer. And then we start straight away chasing after something else to see if we can get that buzz, that happiness buzz again. But of course, we never do, we never can. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to find permanent happiness in impermanent things. Gratitude, contentment, a peaceful mind, inner happiness, supreme goal, that knowledge that you're looking for. So to tame our thoughts, to conquer our minds, and to reach this highest knowledge, which is wisdom, we need to meditate, we need mindfulness, and we need reflection practices. Those three practices on a daily basis are going to help you to conquer your mind, going to help you to tame your thoughts, and going to help you to become a much wiser person. So in those three, you've got a whole day's practice. You start off in the morning and do a morning meditation. Throughout the day, you start to be mindful and you spend as much time being mindful as you can. And at the end of the day, you do a reflection practice. There, you've got a whole day's worth of practice there. No need to go out and go to a temple or go to a meditation center. No need to or have the best bells or whatever. Everything we need, we already have. You have everything you need. You just need to use it with meditation, mindfulness, and reflection. And you do those three things, and everything is going to come your way. That calm mind, that understanding ourselves, less suffering and less attachment, all is yours there in your hands. You already have that. Okay, so now please, questions.
I'll kick off if I may, Yeshe. So, in fact, next week we are not going to have a meeting. It'll be the first time we haven't met since the very first lockdown, and this will be to facilitate this practice, this meditation, mindfulness, and reflection. And maybe somebody else will deal with the gratitude and the positivity of the practice. But what I'd like to ask about, if you perhaps could say something about, one of our visiting teachers said once that through the practices you discover actually what a nasty piece of work you have been. You know, the dreadful things you've done or whatever it is, and so the reflection, okay, so you did something, how will I do it better next time? What about the things that actually are the real, you know, these are the real bad side of me that I don't want anyone to know about, but I did them, and, you know, will my karma, you know, people ask about this, will this catch up with me and so forth. So Vajrasattva practice is something one can do, but what would you suggest other than reciting mantras and visualizations? What would you suggest about that side of it?
Yeah, I love visualizations. I used to do a lot of mantra reciting when I lived in London, and I used to have to get the tube in. So, you know, you'd find a space instead of like, you know, you could in London, I don't know if you've been on the tube, but you can't look at people. It's against the law. You have to keep your head down. So then I used to be chanting mantra the whole time, so I didn't just waste my time. So I think mantra chanting is good to bring your mind into a stable state. But then what are you going to do? Once you're in that stable state, what is next? You can't keep just reciting the mantra and getting your mind in a stable state and then doing nothing with it. You see, this is one of the problems with this the new modern mindfulness movement. They bring you back into the present moment and then they leave you there. And they say, don't judge. Then what the hell are we doing then? I mean, now you brought me back here in the present moment. What do I have to do? And so I think it's the same here when you're doing reciting mantra. It is a good thing to do, but it can't just be the only thing to do. I mean, like when you're doing breathing awareness meditation, it's a good thing to do, but it's only, you know, to get yourself calm and your mind open and relaxed, and then to do something else. And I would say the same for mantra. Mantra is great in, you know, so in those situations where you're waiting for somebody, and instead of like, oh God, and getting impatient, then recite a mantra in those points. Maybe you're in a traffic jam. Instead of, you know, getting frustrated, do mantra. So in those situations, the mantra is great. And the mantra is also good for calming yourself down. Then what? Then you need to be doing something else, like something analytical or some reflection practice. And as for visualization, visualization has its benefits. So, and funny you mentioned this, because there was a report I was reading the other week about the people going into the forest and going for a walk, and they had an MRI scan, and they saw active parts of their brain when they were walking through the forest. Another person was sitting and visualizing that, and near enough the same parts of the brain were activated. So visualization has a huge power. And you know, if you're a person who suffers from anxiety or panic attacks, visualization is a great thing to do. I always tell people to have a happy place, pick your happy place, and then sit quietly. And whenever you need to, go to your happy place. And when you're in your happy place, use your senses, look around, listen, smell, touch the ground, you know, calm yourself down. So when you come back, then you're more relaxed. So I think visualization can do so much for us. So, you know, you can visualize if you're in a lot of pain, you can visualize not being in so much pain. Remember that there's a certain amount of pain we hold in our body, but the worst amount of pain is always in our head.
Sure.
So the pain in the body, we're not going to get rid of, but through visualization and visualizing not having that pain reduces the pain that we're feeling in our mind. So then it reduces our pain level. So I think visualization practices are great. And I think the mantra is good, but you need to do something after the mantra.
And that is what I was asking also. So yes, I mean, I just use those two as an example, mantra and visualization. But I mean, so just reflecting on today's events, for instance, one may have trodden on somebody's toe or insulted somebody inadvertently, maybe, or whatever. So yes, next time I won't be doing it this way. But can regret, I don't mean that one should beat oneself up and feel guilt. No, I'm not saying that at all. But is there anything one can do to try and, well, one can't change the past, I suppose, you'll be telling me, but.
Well, you can learn from it, can't you?
Yes.
The way to change it is to learn from it. I mean, that's all we can do. And if you're not learning from the past, then you're not moving forward. So you see, guilt and regret is not going to help you.
Sure.
They are just destructive emotions, and the only person you're destroying is yourself. And remember, I was saying earlier on about that, how we sabotage ourselves. That is a good point. You know, the guilt and the regret and all of those things, we are sabotaging ourselves. There is no room for guilt. You made a mistake, then learn from it. Don't do it again. Think of a different way to act. If you need to apologize, and then move on. So that's what I would say you should do in those situations. We have to cut ourselves a little bit of slack. We're human beings. We are not perfect. So we are going to make these mistakes. So I would say that is more important, to reflect on that mistake you made and be honest with yourself, and then think of a better way to act next time. That is more beneficial than sitting regret and, oh, I feel so guilty, or I'm embarrassed. All those things are not going to help you. They're just going to sabotage you.
Understood. But what about purification practices? People often say, well, you know, I've got all this karma. I met extremely violent people who, you know, dreadful people in the past, but they are very regretful. And what do I do on my deathbed? You know, I will be confronted with all these demons and things I've done.
It's a bit late then, you see. That's the point, isn't it?
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
During their life, when they've realized their the errors of their way, is purification practice?
Change. You know, karma is really just patterns of behavior, isn't it? It's those patterns of behavior, so seeds that we planted, the potential that we planted, and we've watered them, and they've become our habit. They become, that's the way we are. But we can change that. You know, with this brain has that neuroplasticity where we can mold our brain. You know, that is why when I teach compassion, I always say everybody in the whole world deserves compassion, because we're not looking at behavior. We're looking at human beings. We're looking at the person. And so if you're going to judge people on behavior, then nobody's going to get compassion, are they? We've all done stupid things in our life. People can change. So, but they need to want to change. You see, I'm a more practical person than you'll get some traditional Buddhist teachers that will tell you about purification and things like that. Me, I'm a lot more practical. And the way that I think is a good way of doing it is reflecting and learning and moving forward.
Right.
So I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with purification, but remember that what you're doing is it's like a placebo. We're trying to actually trick ourselves a little bit. Visualization is exactly the same. Visualization practice is a bit like a placebo. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with doing the purification practice. But if you think that you just need to do a whole day's worth of Vajrasattva practice and you purified your whole life, and then you go out and you shout and you act exactly the same way, then what is the point?
Understood. Yes.
So
one last question. I don't mean to hog your. Sorry, I'm talking over. I don't mean to hog the limelight. I know that everyone's queuing up to ask a question. The mantra recitation on the underground, did you say it's under breath, in silent soliloquy, or
yeah,
was it
of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I didn't want people looking at me.
Okay, right. But sorry, everyone, that I've hogged the limelight. Over to you. He's there for us.
They've forgotten their questions now.
I'm guessing they're in agreement.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
It's not really a question, just an observation on the reflections. At the end of the day, it's very difficult to do it without your own bias, isn't it? It's very easy to judge and say, oh, I like this person, and they're my friends, and they've done something that I think's wrong, and they've done, the other person's given me something to do, and I don't agree with it, and it's all silly. It's very difficult. I know it's work in progress, but it's very difficult to not have judgments and biases, and especially on entrenched habits like work and family relationships and things like that. That is so entrenched. It's very difficult to be objective in how you view it. I think that's how I feel sometimes when I try and do these things.
But I agree with you, but that's why reflection, see, there's not one thing. There's not just one thing you need to do. There's no little magic wand in Buddhism. No. It's a whole path. So you have to do meditation because you need to look at those deepest, darkest sides of you that you keep hidden, because that is where we're going to find a lot of our patterns of behavior. We need to do mindfulness so we keep catching ourselves when we're doing these patterns of behavior. The best time to change something is when you're doing it, when you catch yourself, oh, God, I'm doing that again, and then change. And reflection. So, you can't just take one of these practices, and you can't just take one of Buddha's teachings. It's a whole path. And that's what I was saying earlier on, that Buddhism is a path of practice. So, yeah, the reflection practice is not the end of it all. I mean, it is just part of the process, along with meditation and mindfulness. But if you do those three things, you're going to learn so much about yourself. And remember, it's about you. So when you sit down and you reflect back, remember you're reflecting back on what worked and what didn't work for you. You can't change your friends. So it's no good judging the friends. They did this or they did that. That's what I said. Don't play that blame game. We're looking at you. You're looking at what did you do and what can you do differently next time. So it's about you. It's not about the way they act. It's hard enough to change ourselves without trying to change everybody else around us. But the reflection practice, I agree with you. It is not the end of it all. But I can tell you from experience that it is such a good practice to do. It is one that will change your life because you'll start to see things that you didn't even notice about yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so then we'll get on to number 4. So we'll only do.
Can I interrupt?
No. On. Yeah, of course.
Just because you survived your chest infection hasn't made you omnipotent. Look, I'm mindful that it must be approaching 1 o'clock where you are. Is that correct?
10 to 1, yeah.
10 to 1, I thought it was. Would you like to draw a line here?
No.
Okay.
I wanted to do 4, if I could.
Okay. If you feel up to it.
Well, are you bored now? If you want me to go, I'll go. You just say. Yeah.
I'll reflect on that. No, carry on if you're willing. But we're very appreciative. But I don't want to exaggerate. And you've got to be up so early again. Is it worth going to bed? In fact, okay. Yeah. If you're sure.
Yeah, I won't talk too long about this one. So the lesson 4 is about the path to awaken our minds. So in verse 182, it said, it's hard to obtain human birth, harder to live like a human being, harder still to understand the Dharma. But the hardest of all is to attain the awakened mind. So I'll just go quickly through here. What this is talking about the 7 factors of awakening. So there are 7 factors that we need to bring into play so we can awaken our minds. Now, remembering everything else that I've said, so this is not separate from the other 3 teachings, is the other 3 teachings and this, okay? So the first one, the Buddha said, out of the factors we need to do before we can awaken our mind is mindfulness. So we've spoken about mindfulness. I have no need to talk about it again, but it shows how important mindfulness is, because it's part of those 7 factors that we need to awaken our minds. The second one is investigation. So the investigation here is not just about ourselves. So I've been talking about reflection, practice, and meditation, about self, investigate self. Yeah, we certainly need to do that. But we also need to investigate the teachings. We need to investigate, ask questions, and meditate on, and then implement the teachings. It can't just be about looking at ourselves and trying to change ourselves. That's a huge thing to do. But we need to do it in the context of Buddha's teachings. And like I was saying earlier on, about impermanence, and particularly about non-self, and about cause and effect and attachment, all of these key teachings that Buddha left for us, we need to investigate. But not just investigate, we need to implement. If you just investigate, then you'll become a great teacher that can tell everybody what to do, but you're not doing it yourself. So, part of the investigation is asking questions, clearing up any doubt, then meditating on it. Because remember, when you investigate, when you've got these teachings, they are knowledge, they are not yours. Somebody else has given them to you. So in Buddhism, you're encouraged to look for yourself. Does this fit into the way I live my life? How does it fit in? How can I help myself by changing like this? So we have the teachings, we investigate his teachings, we clear up any doubts we might have, and then we meditate on those teachings to turn it from knowledge into wisdom, and we implement those teachings. So investigation of self and teaching is the second part of the 7 factors of awakening. So the third part is effort. So there are 4 parts of the effort. So first of all, we look at unskillful actions. So we need to avoid unskillful actions. So the unskillful actions that we don't have at the moment, we need to avoid doing those. And the unskillful actions that we have, we need to put in the effort to overcome those. The skillful actions we have to develop. So if we don't have certain skillful actions like compassion and empathy and things like that, if we don't have those skillful actions, then we need to develop them. And if we have them, then we need to maintain them. So effort means we put in the effort to avoid or overcome unskillful actions, and the effort to develop and maintain skillful actions. So that is where our effort has to be, in our actions, because remember, your actions are going to plant seeds, and we need to be careful that whatever we're doing is skillful. And because if it's skillful, then it's not going to harm you and it's not going to harm anybody else. The fourth part is joy. And this is what I was speaking about a little moment ago, inner joy. So I'm not talking about happiness here. I'm talking what they in Buddhism we call it bliss, yeah, but I hate that word. I don't know why I don't like it, but for me it doesn't necessarily for me it doesn't necessarily explain the feeling you have. And I think it's like a joy that we have inside of us. So it's important. How we get that joy is what I was saying before about gratitude, contentment, and a peaceful mind. That is how you're going to have that inner joy. And once you've got that inner joy, then nobody can take that away from you. So the fourth part is that joy. The fifth part is tranquility. So tranquility, again, is inside of us. It's total tranquil. This tranquility, we can't force it. You can't sit there and in meditation and think, you know, be tranquil, be tranquil, be tranquil. It can't be forced. And actually that tranquility only comes about because of the four things before. It comes about because of mindfulness, investigation, putting in the effort, and having that inner peace, that inner joy. If you've got those four, then tranquility is going to come. The sixth part is focus, so meditation. And what we're talking about here is the single-pointed meditation, where we've trained our mind to meditate on one thing. A lot of people spend an awful lot of time meditating on all different things when they've never learned how to single-pointedly focus. And so how are we ever going to do meditation properly if we can't focus on one thing? And that is why the breathing awareness practice is a fantastic practice. You do that to train your mind to stay focused on the breath for as long as it can. And when you've learned that skill you can take wherever you go with you. I mean, if you're out driving, you can be single-pointedly focused. At work, single-pointedly focused. That focus only comes through doing meditation, and it comes when our mind is tranquil. So when we have that tranquil mind, we'll be able to learn that single-pointed meditation focus. And the seventh aspect of the awakened mind is equanimity. So equanimity means the middle path between extremes. So instead of being pulled one way or another, we walk down the middle path. So instead of allowing our minds to be pulled off into some sort of negative state or pulled off into some sort of overly positive state, we try to walk the middle path. So equanimity in Buddhism is about the mind, keeping the mind steady and stable. And that comes again from a calm and a focused mind. So your mind will stay steady and stable if you can focus, stay single-pointedly focused. And you'll get single-pointedly focused if your mind is tranquil. And you can only get that tranquil mind when you are mindful, when you investigate, you put in the effort and you get that inner joy. So this is how the 7 factors of awakening come in. So it's mindfulness, it's investigation, effort, it's joy, it's tranquility, it's focus, and it's equanimity. So these are the 7 factors of awakening. I just wanted to do that. I know I've rushed that a bit because it is getting late and my voice is going. So I just wanted to finish that off. So if you have any final questions now. So remember that those 7 factors are important, as are the meditation, the mindfulness, and the reflection practices. All of this is like a lifetime's work. But if you start now, then you're going to start moving forward and you're going to become that best possible person. We all have an idea in our head who we want to be or who we think we should be. This is the way of actually getting that, by doing these practices. So please, if you have any questions, then.
I'm biding my time.
Yes, you were greedy before.
But I'm working. I shall reflect on that. Well, I don't know if there are anymore, but I think this practice that you promised us and have now delivered will be very useful. And as I say, we will have a break after a year and a half from our Monday teachings. And this is something that we should be working on. I fully endorse that. I endorse you. It's not giving you a testimonial, isn't it?
Thank you.
He's a very good monk, this one.
Thank you.
Look, this is very much appreciated. Are you sure there's no one else out there who wants to ask anything or voice anything? But really much appreciated. We did a medicine Buddha for you last week. You must have felt it about this time last week. You must have felt it in your.
That's why I'm here now. I can speak. I couldn't speak last week, so I couldn't.
It works. But look, we hope that in the absence of an actual visit, we may call on you again online. But we do intend to return to our usual meeting place probably fairly soon. But I think there's merit in being prudent and not rushing these things. But in any event, we have plenty to do, haven't we? Yeshe, we have enough to do in our lives, and
I think so.
You've given us an ideological sword now, or a spiritual sword that we must brandish and work on. So thank you so much. I hope you have a good sleep, and
thank you.
Set your alarm. Is it for 5 o'clock? Did you say in about 4
I
hours?
don't have to set it. It's already set in here.
It's
That's
well done. Okay. Bye-bye to
Okay,
India.
so thank you for inviting me again. And,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Yeshe.
look forward to seeing you all again next year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Very best.
Great.
Very best.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, bye. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.